Hello, welcome to FundForum Asia 2017. I'm Sarah Clarke, coming to you from the JW Marriott Hotel in Hong Kong. Joining me is a leader in the global asset management industry. He's a former CEO and CEO of PIMCO. He's now a managing director and senior advisor. Now, Doug, thank you very much for joining us, Doug Hodge.
Sarah, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Let's start with a question that looks at the industry from the big picture side of things. Is the industry in good shape or bad shape?
I think the industry is in reasonably good shape, quite honestly. We've had rising asset prices across pretty much all asset classes over the last 7 years since the financial crisis. So on the whole, the industry is in pretty good shape. Nevertheless, there are some important forces within the industry that are impacting all of us. The most important one is that when you look at valuations today, whether it's in interest rates at such historically low interest rates, or equity valuations, or cap rates in real estate, asset prices look pretty full right now, which portends lower returns looking forward. That impacts investors most certainly, but it also impacts our industry. Beyond that, we're all having to adapt to a changing and frankly more harsher regulatory environment, which constrains some of the things we may have done otherwise, although perhaps not so much, but it certainly increases the cost burdens on all of us as we adapt to the literally thousands of regulations that have gone into effect over the last several years, both in the United States, in Europe, and across Asia. And then finally is the new buzzword in our industry, FinTech. How do we respond to this rapidly changing financial technology? And that will clearly impact so many of the things that we do in terms of providing financial advice and ultimately investment performance to our clients.
Okay, and you mentioned before in the speech here at the FundForum in Asia that if the asset managers or the firms, if they don't embrace FinTech, they could become obsolete. They've got to adapt. Is that right?
I absolutely subscribe to that. Yes, we must adapt. As I look at FinTech, I think there are essentially three dimensions to how financial technology is changing our business. The first is just the simple use of financial technology in providing faster, cheaper, more efficient processes. So if you think about settlements, back office, payments, that's an important part. That is already largely in place. The second is redefining the client experience. So one simple implementation of that is robo-advice, but it goes far beyond that. How individual investors will receive, how they will assimilate information, and ultimately how they will transact will be defined by financial technology, and that client experience is changing very rapidly. The third area, which I think we've just begun to scratch the surface, is the whole notion of using artificial intelligence to make investment decisions. So algorithmic trading is one I'd say very frankly simple implementation of that, but as I think of PIMCO and credit analysis. So we have a whole team of credit analysts stationed all over the world, analyzing companies every day, providing their evaluations to our credit portfolio managers. If we gave that same information that they use and built those algorithmic or artificial intelligent deep learning model technologies, could they replace our credit analyst team? I don't know, but I'm sure we've got to be thinking about that even today. So that's where I see the marketplace moving, and again, those firms that don't respond will be left at the post.
And the marketplace is moving towards what we discussed earlier again, which I found intriguing, your description of the millennial. The millennial investor is obviously, it's an increasingly significant part of the market. Who is it, and how should these companies adapt? Obviously technology, but are they a cost-savvy or cost-conscious, tech-savvy operator, these investors, or the future?
So first, let's define who these millennials are, and then we can talk about how influential they are today and how perhaps influential they will be in the future. So very simply, the baby boom generation are people born between 1946 and 1964. So they're in their mid-50s to early 70s. Following the baby boom generation are the Gen Xers. So the Gen Xers are kind of from the mid-30s to early 50s. And then come the millennials. So the millennials are people who were born between 1980 and 2004. So they're literally teenagers to people, say, 35, 36 years of age. So they're not rich yet. They haven't accumulated the wealth that would be influential to our industry. But they will be the largest generation in history, and they will be the wealthiest generation by a long measure. So they will become very influential. Now, how do they behave? Well, we can get some insights in how to look at other parts of their lifestyles. They prefer access over ownership. So less apt to own a home, more likely to rent. Perhaps more likely to lease an automobile than buy one. They tend to get married later in life, so fewer children, smaller family units. They're more socially aware. So how we respond to those, how we respond to the millennials as they begin to first, perhaps as that wealth transfer happens, and then as they create their own wealth. They're also more tech savvy. So that comes back to the whole notion of FinTech. There are some studies which would suggest that a millennial investor will trust the information that they would receive through a computer rather than the advice they receive from a traditional financial advisor sitting across the desk from them. Now, we all know that behind that computer lies another person. Nevertheless, I think that is instructive in terms of how they will receive, how they will assimilate, and then ultimately how they'll transact in terms of managing their wealth.
That's a lot for the industry to think about. Thank you very much, Doug Hodge, for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah, thank you.
We've run out of time. Thank you for joining us too. You can follow more of the conversations and interviews on Twitter if you look for @FundForum or look for the hashtag FFAsia. Thanks very much for joining us.